What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another video. Now, in today's video, we'll be covering the entire TOEFL speaking section, so take out your notebooks, grab your writing utensils, and get ready to take some outstanding notes. That's the independent speaking question we'll be covering today, so let's read it together. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Students should not be allowed to bring cell phones into the classroom. Now, this time I'm going to disagree with the statement, so the beginning sentence is going to be, in my eyes, the statement that, copy and paste the question, does not ring true to me, or doesn't ring true to me. Now, the first reason I'm going to say, having this electronic device in class can be quite beneficial. So instead of saying cell phone again, I'm going to change it to this electronic device. And the second reason I'm going to say, not having a cell phone in the classroom can end up being detrimental. So that's the second reason. Now, the first detail, I'm going to talk about how the cell phone or smartphone these days has a lot of useful features that can be quite handy in the classroom. And in the second reasons detail, I'm going to talk about emergencies and how having a cell phone would be very helpful in that case too. All right, so let's see how I put that all together in my sample response. And please don't forget to try to lip sync along, okay? In my eyes, the statement that students should not be allowed to bring their cell phones into the classroom does not ring true to me. To begin with, the first thing that came to my mind as I read this question is that having this electronic device in class can be very beneficial. This is mainly due to the fact that doing so would enable students to get the most out of their education by using some helpful features such as a voice recorder and camera. In addition, another reason that supports my opinion is that not having a cell phone in class can end up being detrimental. This notion makes perfect sense to me since students, especially these days, should have the ability to call their loved ones for help in case of emergencies. All right, so that was my sample response. After my second detail ended, I noticed that I only had about 2 seconds left, so I'm definitely not going to stretch myself, push the envelope, and force myself to say the ending. So guys, if you have about 5 or more seconds left, go ahead and try to say the ending statement. But if you have fewer than 5 seconds left, you don't really need to do so, okay? Let's move on to the easier questions, integrated speaking. All right, welcome back. That's the reading passage that we'll be looking at together for this task 2 question. The reading passage is an announcement. Let's look at it together to organize the beginning sentence and the ending sentence. So if you do this properly, your first impression and last impressions should both be completely organized, even before the conversation starts, okay? So that's our mindset, that's our objective. All right, say goodbye to the big multi-person study tables in Turner Library. This summer, the tables will be exchanged for new personal study cubicles. All right, so the university is planning to exchange the tables in the library for new personal study cubicles. Now, if you want to say Turner Library, go ahead, but I just decided to say the library. Now, let's keep reading the passage to find the advantage of this new plan. These new units will allow students to have privacy. There it is. Allow students to have more privacy. If you want to say when studying in the library, go ahead, but it's not really necessary. Okay, we're done with the reading passage. Let's listen to the conversation and take notes together.
They're making a mistake.
What do you mean?
Look, they're trying to do away with distractions so we can study better. But with this change, we won't have anywhere in the library to get together to work on group projects.
True. Group project work is common these days.
So instead of buying these new units, they should use the money to build meeting rooms. And that would reduce any noise in the main library areas.
Yeah, that's what we could really use. There's just not as much need to work in isolation.
Exactly. And the other thing is, what's this about overcrowding? Well, sure, we have more students enrolled at the university this year, but do we really have a problem with overcrowding?
I don't think so. I always get a whole table to myself.
Right. I see empty tables there all the time. It'll just be a waste of money to replace what we have, since what we have now is sufficient for the amount of students that use the library.
All right, now in this conversation, the man was the main character and he did not like the school's new decision. And the first reason he said, with this change, students will not have anywhere in the library to work on group projects. As a result, the university should build more meeting rooms instead of purchasing personal study cubicles or exchanging the tables in the library. Second reason, the library is not overcrowded because there are always empty tables for students to use. Needless to say, this new policy is just a huge waste of money. All right, so those were the details that I took notes on. Let's see how I put it together in my sample response. Please do not forget to lip sync along if possible. According to the announcement, the university is planning to exchange the tables in the library for new personal study cubicles. However, the man is not looking forward to this. First and foremost, the man mentioned that with this change, students will not have anywhere in the library to work on group projects. As a result, he really thinks that the school should build more meeting rooms instead of purchasing personal study cubicles. On top of this, the man also said that the library is not overcrowded because there are always empty tables for students to use. Needless to say, he thinks that this new policy is a huge waste of money. Even though the school believes that this decision will allow students to have more privacy when they study in the library, the man opposes the university's new plan for these two reasons mentioned in the conversation. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. Okie dokie. Now, after my second reason ended, I noticed that I still had about 20 seconds left, and hopefully you picked up on my facial expression. That's why I decided to add a couple of extra words over here. Have more privacy when they study in the library. Problem solved. And my ending statement was said in a very, very steady pace because I knew that I had a lot of time left. So those are the things that you have control over, which would be your speaking pace and the words that you actually say. So if you have some more breathing room than you expected to have, please take advantage of those extra seconds and take your time. All right, let's move on to task 3. All right, that's the task 3 reading passage we'll be covering today. So the topic is ritualization. Now, let's look at the reading passage and look for the topic first. The topic word comes out in the second line for me, a process called ritualization. Now, that's the last word in this sentence, so it's gonna make us paraphrase no matter what. Let's move on and look for another easier sentence that we can maybe copy and paste. So the next sentence says, in this process, so this process is definitely ritualization, correct? In this process, the purpose of a given behavior changes over time. A behavior that originally had a practical purpose develops into one that communicates a specific message. That's the sentence that we can kind of copy and paste. Now, originally, I would like you guys to say which first for the star symbol, but for this definition, we're gonna change it to in which, all right? So the ending statement for a lecture that has 2 examples would be, to sum up, these were 2 perfect examples of ritualization in which the purpose of a given behavior changes over time and communicates a specific message. We're done with the reading passage. Let's listen to the lecture and take notes together.
Let's start with an example you may be familiar with. What's one thing dogs typically do when they feel threatened? When they want to protect themselves? That's right, they show their teeth. And when we see this, we know this behavior means basically stay away. Now, here's how this behavior became a recognizable warning. A long, long time ago, a dog sensing danger would get ready to bite whatever animal was threatening it. It started by baring its teeth, but the purpose of doing this was something very simple. The dog instinctively was making sure it wouldn't bite its own lips when it bit the other animal, okay? But what happened? Other dogs, other animals, over time, they learned that this teeth baring always came before a dog was going to bite. And so they started to read it as a signal to be careful, to keep away or risk getting bitten. This scenario, repeated time after time, also led to the dog's awareness that by simply showing its teeth, a lot of the time that was protection enough. What had been a simple physical preparation to bite had developed into a kind of defense mechanism in and of itself. The dog learned it did not need to actually attack, but could get the right result from just communicating the possibility of an attack through showing its teeth. It started to use this behavior as a warning signal.
In this lecture, the professor only gave us one example, and that example was about dogs. Now, I have my red marker in hand because I decided to cross these words out, okay? Now, let's connect the dots together. To begin with, dogs typically show their teeth when they feel threatened. This behavior means stay away because dogs always bare their teeth when they are in danger. However, dogs initially showed their teeth in order to avoid biting their lips. In contrast, as time passed, this behavior became a defense mechanism because it served as a warning signal for dogs. Alright, so in this lecture, the act of showing teeth was ritualized and therefore became a method of communication. So in the beginning, dogs showed their teeth to avoid biting off their own lips, but eventually as time passed, mentioned here, this behavior just became some kind of body language because everyone recognized it as, hey, stay away from me, I'm about to attack you. Okay, now let's see how I put this together in my sample response. Don't forget to lip sync along if possible. In the lecture, the professor elaborated on a specific example of dogs to explain the concept of ritualization. To begin with, dogs typically show their teeth when they feel threatened. This behavior means stay away due to the fact that dogs always bare their teeth when they feel like they're in danger. However, dogs initially showed their teeth in order to avoid biting their lips. In contrast, as time passed, this behavior eventually became a defense mechanism simply because it served as a warning signal for all dogs. To sum up, this was a perfect example of ritualization, in which the purpose of a given behavior changes over time and even communicates a specific message, given by the professor in the lecture. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. All right, whew, man, did I have to play with my speaking pace. So this is what happens when you speak too fluently, when everything is too organized, I guess. But to be honest, ladies and gentlemen, you do not need more information than this. And because I'm the type of person who wants to produce a sample response that's as perfect as possible, I feel kind of dissatisfied with my sample response. However, let's think about this logically. If you were able to spend even 48 seconds of the 60 seconds that you're given very fluently and without much hesitation, you're going to be given a good score, right? Because 48 seconds of fluent second language speaking, by the way, you're summarizing a lecture, which is not easy to understand or take notes on, you're going to get a good score, okay? So what I'm saying is, even if you have about 9, 8, or even 10 seconds left, you'll be fine. As long as the amount of time you spent speaking was good, was nice to listen to, pleasant to the ears, you're gonna get a good score, all right? Okay, let's move on to the next question, the last question. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this question doesn't have a reading passage, so we're gonna jump right into the lecture. Get ready to take notes and let's listen to what the professor has to say.
Now let's talk about a particular cultural process, diffusion. Since the beginning of human history, diverse cultures have taken advantage of one another's innovations when they've come into contact. Diffusion is the process whereby something cultural, like a custom, a type of food, or an invention, is spread from one group to another, or from one society to another. One group adopts a cultural item, or more selectively, just part of a cultural item of another group, you see? Now, diffusion can occur through a variety of ways: military conquest, or tourism, or, well, even something like the influence of satellite TV shows around the world. For example, take something like reading a modern newspaper here in the U.S. Have you ever thought about where the letters, the characters on the page you're reading, where they came from? They were borrowed from another culture many centuries ago. Then the printing of the words. Well, that process was invented in Germany. And finally, the paper itself. Paper was invented in China. These innovations from all over the world were shared across cultures over time, and so today we have newspapers in the U.S. So the process of diffusion might take place over long distances and over long periods of time. Now, I'm not saying that diffusion happens easily. As I mentioned, sometimes it's selective. For instance, many people in the U.S. have accepted the practice of acupuncture, the Chinese practice of using needles to cure disease or relieve pain. So lots of people in the U.S. have realized that acupuncture is effective, but few of them fully understand or have committed themselves to the philosophy behind acupuncture. Cultures tend to resist ideas which seem too foreign, too different from their own beliefs and values. But the ideas which aren't perceived as too different are often incorporated, absorbed, diffused into their culture. So the practice of acupuncture has been absorbed into U.S. culture, but not the philosophies of Chinese medicine.
All right, now this is a good example of a very difficult lecture. So for us, a terrible lecture. Now, my conjecture is that if something like this comes up, presents itself at the real test, 99 out of 100 students who listen, test takers who listen to this lecture would be lost. They'd be like, what the heck just happened? What am I supposed to say? So don't feel bad if this lecture wasn't easy for you to take notes on or even easy for you to understand. Okay, now, in this situation, we can say a lot of things for the beginning and ending sentence. The topic is diffusion. Clearly, there's a concept that the professor wants to talk about. So depending on what the professor talked about at a significant length in the beginning sentence, we can wrap it up by saying how diffusion affects society or how diffusion occurs. Or we can even say how diffusion exactly works, if you remember what I said in my previous videos. Okay, so the beginning and ending sentences are not problematic at all. Now, in the first section, I'm going to say this. To begin with, the letters and characters used in modern newspapers were actually borrowed from other cultures. Plus, the printing press was invented in Germany. So, the process of diffusion takes place across a long period of time. Okay, so that's the first section. Furthermore, many people in the United States accept the practice of acupuncture. However, only a few have fully accepted this practice because it's too different from what they're familiar with. In other words, the practice of acupuncture has been accepted, but not the philosophy of Chinese medicine. All right, so in the second section, the professor wanted to say how some parts of a different country's culture might be accepted and most of it might not be accepted because it's too different, too dissimilar. There's too much of a discrepancy. All right, so let's listen to how I put this together and lip sync along if possible. The professor gave a lecture about how diffusion exactly works. To begin with, the letters and characters used in modern newspapers were actually borrowed from other cultures. On top of this, the printing press was invented in Germany. So, the process of diffusion takes place across a long period of time. Furthermore, many people in the United States have accepted the practice of acupuncture. On the other hand, only a few people have fully accepted Chinese medicine simply because it's too different from what they're accustomed to. In other words, the practice of acupuncture has been accepted, but not the philosophy of Chinese medicine. In summation, this was how diffusion exactly works, which was illustrated by the letters and characters used in modern newspapers and the practice of acupuncture, given by the professor in lecture. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. Alrighty, now I still had about 19, 18, or even 20 seconds left after I was done with the listening's detail, so I decided to say, which was illustrated by the letters and characters used in modern newspapers and the practice of acupuncture, So if I only had about 16, 15, or 14 seconds left, I would have only said which was illustrated by modern newspapers and acupuncture. Okay? So the more familiar with, the more proficient, the more well-versed you become in speaking, the more you'll be able to notice those small changes you can make, those small tweaks that you can make in your speaking response to deal with the extra amount of time you have left, or deal with the fact that you don't have as much time as you expected. All right, if you guys enjoyed the sample responses and the speaking questions in this video, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you still have not done so, share the content with your close friends and family members if they need the extra assistance, but most importantly, if you are a self-disciplined and dedicated individual, reach out to me about my tutoring services. Let's get the score that you deserve and need as quickly as possible. Stay tuned for the next video. Peace!